Have you seen those posters that say, "All I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten"? Well, today's video is kind of like that, except it's a slightly irreverent lesson that I learned from my 6th grade teacher. Not sure how a 6th grade lesson can make you a better communicator and leader? Well, check out today's video to find out. If better communication is something you are interested in, then subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when I post new content each week. I bring over 20 years of experience to my work, helping people be better communicators and better leaders. So it is a little comical that I'm using a lesson from 6th grade in today's video, but trust me, by the end of the video, it will all make sense. In all honesty, I don't really remember much from my 6th grade year. I mean, it was a few years ago, but there is one moment, one afternoon that has just stuck with me all of these years later. So we were in class, a normal, typical day, and in response to a comment from one of my classmates, our 6th grade teacher just stopped what he was doing, calmly walked up to the chalkboard. Yes, I said chalkboard, not smartboard. It was the 80s, people. So he walked up to the chalkboard and wrote the word assume in big letters on the chalkboard. And he said, "Kids, never assume. Do you know what assuming does?" And we all just sat there, shaking our heads, shrugging our shoulders. No, sir, we don't know what assuming does. So then he proceeded to take his piece of chalk and put a line down through the word, a dividing line, after the second S, and then another dividing line down through the word after the U. And then he declared, "Kids, never assume, because assuming makes an out of you and me." And we all just kind of sat there, not really knowing what to say. Some of us chuckled a little bit because our teacher had just used that word. But yeah, we all just sat there and thought, okay. And at the time, I didn't really appreciate that little educational sidebar for what it was. It seemed very random, and as a 6th grader, I wasn't sure, and my friends weren't really sure what to think. But looking back on it as an adult, I can appreciate what a significant and worthwhile lesson that was. And clearly it left an impression on me because I remember this all these years later. As an adult looking back, I also find it a little disconcerting, albeit a little bit humorous, that our teacher used the word openly in class. But again, it was the 80s, and we were fresh off the time when teachers would smoke in class. So, it's all relative. But I digress. Aside from making an arse out of two people, why is assuming so detrimental to effective communication? This quote by William H. White, I think, really sums it up. He said, "The great enemy of communication, we find, is the illusion of it." Too often, we assume we're communicating with someone. We assume that we have effectively communicated what we're trying to say. We assume that people just know our wants, needs, expectations. We assume we know what other people are thinking or feeling, and so we respond based upon that assumption. And generally, we assume that we've understood the other person's perspective. As we've learned, however, all of this assuming is a very dangerous game. So how do we avoid the assumption trap? I recommend using a couple of techniques from motivational interviewing, and two in particular. The first technique is to reflect back what you've heard. And you don't have to stick to the cliche, "So what I hear you saying is," although you can use that phrase in such a not cheesy way that it's fine. But there are other phrases or prompts that you can use. But really the idea is to reflect back in your own words what you've understood the person has shared with you. And here's some other prompts that I recommend if you don't want to stick with the "so what I hear you saying is" prompt. "I think I understand, but just to be sure. So tell me if I'm on the right track here." Or, "Just so I'm clear, so if I've got this right, Or, it sounds like, is that right? Use the options that feel natural to you. This should be part of a natural conversation. You don't want it to feel robotic or forced. So use a reflective statement that fits your conversational style and sounds natural to you, and switch it up. You don't have to use the same one every time, but alternate between phrases so that it does feel like just a natural reflection and paraphrasing of the information back to the person, just to make sure that you've understood what it is they're sharing. And then see what they have to say. They might say, yes, that's what I meant. Or they might say, well, not exactly. What I really was trying to say is this. Or they might say, no, that's not what I was saying at all. And then ask them to clarify and give you some additional information. The second technique is to summarize the conversation. So as you're wrapping up, take a few moments to summarize the main themes, points, decisions, whatever was discussed during your conversation. This can be really helpful to ensure that everybody is on the same page, and it also helps reinforce whatever was discussed during that time. So if you are a leader or a boss and you gave someone a directive, it can be helpful to take a moment to recap that directive, or to even ask that person to share their understanding of what they're going to do moving forward. If you have set up some type of goal or action plan, it can be helpful to just briefly summarize the steps of what's going to be done. And if you've divvied up some work assignments, it can be really helpful to take a few moments to say who's going to do what. For example, okay, we've decided that I'm going to do A, B, and C, and I will get those done by Wednesday, and you've agreed to do X, Y, and Z and have those done by Thursday. Does that sound about right? Okay, cool. So it's just a very quick recap, but it ensures that everybody's on the same page and that there's just no misunderstanding or what's going to happen moving forward. Do you use reflective statements or some other technique to ensure understanding during your conversations? If so, drop us a comment below and let us know. Okay, in summary, don't assume people can read your mind. They can't. And don't assume you know what other people are thinking and you can read their mind. You can't. It's better to seek clarity, have the dialogue, ask the questions, reflect back your understanding. Trust me, it will just be so much better if you do. If you want even more information on how to have effective communication and how to cultivate a feedback culture within your team, you can download my free guide. The link to download is in the video description below. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. And you can check out my other videos on how to receive and process feedback and what not to do when providing feedback. And be sure to check back each week when I release new content. Be well and be courageous.